In the art of soutache and bead embroidery, a ladder refers to a row of beads captured between two stacks. Every ladder has one each of 4 attribute pairs. Its shape can be curved or straight, its line can be parallel or graduated, its terminations can be open or closed, and its foundation can be secured or independent. For today's lesson, we are making a curved, graduated, open, secured ladder. In much the same way as we end a stack, we are going to begin this ladder by sewing through the stack where the hole of the bead naturally meets the stack. Curve the stack as you sew through it, and remember to stitch it where you hold it. Take time between stitches to organize the stack and assess its alignment. As you begin putting the second bead onto the ladder, consider its placement. Beads should not be crowded. When you sew through the secured stack, your needle will hit the bead around which you formed the first lollipop. Angle the needle up and let it slide out from between the secured stack and the center bead. Again, readjust your stacks, your soutache. Make sure that your alignment is all consistent, and then take your next stitch. You can begin to think of your stitches as a curved or S-shaped pattern that's forming between the unsecured or working stack and the secured stack. Each stitch is a rung on the ladder, and a bead will hang on every rung. One of the things that makes soutache and bead embroidery so beautiful are the curves of soutache themselves. Consequently, the line or the curve of the stack is the thing that your eye will go to when you look at your finished work. Small spaces between the beads and even between the beads and the stack are normal. Avoid the temptation to over-tension your thread. Maintain the curve of the stack. If you feel like your beads are a little bit loose, don't worry, that's easy to correct later on. Complete your ladder using 2 size 8 seed beads. When you've completed your ladder, take a look at the ladder and the curve of the soutache stack. It should be nice and smooth. You shouldn't have too many dimples or indentations. Dimples and indentations are an indicator that you have applied too much thread tension. In many patterns, the end of a ladder is marked by a reverse curve. We're doing that here. Turning that stack back on itself, however, may result in the ladder being pulled apart. We want to lock the ladder by setting a stitch, simply retracing our thread path 1 or 2 times. In this portion of the video, I'm working on the back of the work. Notice that my needle does not go all the way through the secured stack. It doesn't really matter. You'll find that this medium is very forgiving. As long as I put my needle back in right where it came out, the stitch won't show. At the end of this ladder, we're going to reverse the curve on itself and end the stack, just like we did before. Again, the mnemonic device is wrap, tack, whip, and snip. So here we're getting ready to put in the 6mm bead. We're wrapping that. There's your shaping stitches to complete wrapping the bead. And here are those tacking stitches to connect one stack behind the other. The whip stitches to keep the stack from fraying after it's trimmed. and the snip. Wrap, tack, whip, and snip. Assessing the spacing of the beads in the ladder, they are a little loose, but I'm more dissatisfied with the angle of the 4mm bead. I can reset that bead because I kept my thread tension very loose. Remember, you can always fix a loose bead. You cannot make a correction to something that has been sewn in too tightly. Here I'm sewing back through the secured stack and the bead that's bothering me. And I'm just changing its angle a little bit by stitching off in a new direction. You should begin to think of your soutache and bead embroidery as a form of soft sculpture. There are many, many ways to go in and make corrections and fine adjustments, as long as you keep your thread tension nice and relaxed. If you find that you have pulled too tightly in a certain area and you've gone more than 2 or 3 stitches beyond it, the only real way to correct it is go in and snip the thread and then resecure the beads. A bridge is an optional decorative embellishment, usually put across a join. To begin your bridge, sew from the back of the work so that the needle is exiting the side of the innermost braid, just to the right of the join and close to the bead. You're not trying to sew through the rib of the braid, and you're not trying to sew between 2 braids. Pick up a size 11, a size 8, and a size 11 seed bead, and sew down through the innermost braid to the left of the join. This is the corresponding point across the join. That's why we call it a bridge. It's making a bridge across that gap. Sew back up through the innermost braid to the right of the join, but a little further away from the bead, a little closer to the actual connection of the join itself, and then sew through the center size 8 bead only. Sew back down at the corresponding point across the join. This will pull the bridge or that little loop of beads into a soft curve. It follows the center bead and it keeps the loop from getting caught on things. Jump rings are important for adding things like earring findings and toggles, but they can also be a good way to make clean connections and free swinging dangles. When a jump ring is applied properly, only 1/3 to 1/2 of it should be visible from the front of the work. It should not be simply attached to the edge with loops of thread. Working from the back, sew through the stack so that the needle exits the rib of the outer stack just above the split. You don't have to go through the entire stack. 2 or 3 layers of soutache will get the job done. Pick up your jump ring and sew back through the exact same spot. This is essentially a whip stitch, and you simply sew back through the jump ring each time you whip the thread toward yourself. Attach the jump ring firmly to one side of the split, and then cross over and make the same series of stitches on the other side of the split. When you're done, make a couple of shallow stitches in the back of the work. Choose a meaty part, like a place where you ended a stack, and then snip off your thread.